Okay, we are on muscle tissue. So in a previous video, we have covered epithelial tissue and connective tissue. Now we're on muscle tissue. Now muscle comes in three flavors. It comes in skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Now the only one that is voluntary, meaning you have conscious voluntary control, is skeletal muscle. And that's easy to understand because you can voluntarily move your arm. You can voluntarily extend your leg. You can voluntarily contract your skeletal muscles, muscles that attach to your skeleton. Now, skeletal muscle, we say, is contractile. The term contraction means that there is tension that is generated in muscle, meaning when tension is generated, a muscle can shorten, a muscle can lengthen, or a muscle can remain the same length. When we get into muscle in another lecture, we will learn the terms concentric, eccentric, and isometric. Those are different types of contraction. But skeletal muscle is voluntary. You have conscious control. Now, cardiac, we know that cardiac means heart. It is involuntary. If I ask one of my students, hey, your blood pressure is 120 over 80, can you make it contract and create tension in such a way that within a split second you can make it 140 over 90? No chance, Lance. Nuh-uh, mama, right? Can't do it. But if I were to say, hey, your heart rate or your pulse rate is 72 beats per minute, can you make it contract 120 beats per minute right now, the split second? Can't happen. Could you do it in 30 seconds? Maybe. If you start getting on a rowing machine and I say row 500 meters, you can probably get your pulse rate up to 140, 150, 160 easily. But it's involuntary. You can't do it on command. Now, smooth muscle, this is around organs like, let's say, a woman's uterus has smooth muscle around it, which can contract, but involuntarily. A woman knows during that time of month when her bill comes and she's menstruating that she may get cramps. And those cramps are contractions of the smooth muscle. Can't consciously control them. When a woman is in labor and she's in labor, she's going to feel the myometrium of the uterus contract. Okay? Can't consciously control that. Now, under a microscope, when we look at skeletal muscle is called striated because of the striations, the light and dark bands, as well as cardiac muscle is striated. You can see there are light and dark bands. But if I bounce back and forth, you can see that skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, although they are both striated, they are different structures. Where skeletal muscle, these are very cylindrical, they're multinucleated, everything is very parallel and tightly wound together here. But when we look at cardiac muscle, it's different. We see that it's branched, right? We can see that this goes this way, this goes this way, this one goes this way. We have all of these different branches, but we don't see that in skeletal. But they're both considered striated. Again, skeletal muscle, voluntarily, we think of triceps or biceps. You can consciously, voluntarily control the muscles of your face. We can control the movement of your bones, of your extremities. That's skeletal muscle. One of the unique features here of the cardiac, besides being striated, are these perpendicular lines. See these red streaks, these red lines? These are running perpendicular to like these fibers going this way, right? Those are called intercalated discs. What intercalated discs are is really the junction or the union between this cardiomyocyte and this one. They come together. They form a union. That's an intercalated disc. And if you were to pull these apart, we would find what's called gap junctions, GAP. Gap junctions are found next to cells that need to communicate with each other very rapidly. So cardiac muscle cells, nerve cells, where the transmission of information and electrical impulses need to be super fast. We're going to find gap junctions and those intercalated discs. Okay, so that's why we see the heart here. The heart has two top chambers, the two atria, and the bottom chambers, the ventricles. The left ventricle is the thickest muscle of the entire heart. It does a lot of work. Finally, we have smooth muscle, which is involuntary. Again, like cardiac muscle, it's involuntary. It is smooth. They are spindle-shaped with a central nuclei, but they have no striations. The cells are arranged in very closely to form these sheaths. Okay, they are found in parts of the body where we have these internal passageways. So we're going to find them within the stomach, within the esophagus, within the small intestine, within the large intestine. The walls of hollow organs are going to be smooth muscle. A woman's uterus, the myometrium. We're going to find them around blood vessels. So the inner lumen, there's the word lumen again, of a blood vessel is called the endothelium. The middle layer is this layer. This is the smooth muscle. And then the third layer around a blood vessel is the tunica externa. So there's three layers. Blood, I'll put an X here, blood travels through lumen. This layer here is smooth muscle, and this smooth muscle here can vasoconstrict or vasodilate. When it vasoconstricts, the lumen gets smaller and your blood pressure goes up. When it vasodilates, this lumen becomes much larger and the blood pressure drops. So we want to be able to vasoconstrict and vasodilate. When people have LDL cholesterol that is oxidized and damaged, it actually impairs something called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide makes the smooth muscle of the arterial wall dilate. If LDLs become damaged, these damaged LDLs impair nitric oxide, and now the muscular wall can't dilate to lower blood pressure. They become stiff and blood pressure goes up. Okay? Okay, we're going to finish with the last type called nerve tissue. The neuron, which is what we're looking at here, is the functional unit of the neural system. And it is made up of three primary parts. One's called the dendrites, the other is called the cell body, and then the third is called an axon. Those are the three main parts of a neuron. And I like to use my fingers, my palm of my hand, and my forearm, which would look very similar to the structure, whereas your fingers would be the dendrites, the palm of your hand would be the soma, or the cell body, and then the forearm of your hand would be the axon. So dendrites, dendra from Greek means branches. So we have information that comes in to the neuron by way of the dendrite. So information comes in this way through these dendrites, and then the cell body is going to process the information, and it's going to send it out through the axon this way. And the axon is surrounded by myelin sheath, which is really cholesterol and fat. It's an insulator. It's a conductor. It speeds up the electrical impulses through the axon all the way to the very end of the axon, called the axon terminal. And at the very end of these axon terminals, they are going to be neurotransmitters, a type of protein that's stored here called neurotransmitters. When we get into muscle, in another lecture, in another week, we will discover that at the very, very end at the nerve ending, we're going to have muscle that attaches to it. And we're going to call this junction the neuromuscular junction. That's where the nerve and the muscle come into play. And how does the nerve and muscle communicate? Because there are neurotransmitters here at the end. A very important one called ACH, which stands for acetylcholine. That is an excitatory neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction that's involved in excitation of the muscle to make it contract. When the myelin demyelinates or break down, that's a disease referred to as MS, multiple sclerosis. MS, multiple sclerosis. So again, we have dendrites, the cell body, and an axon. The information travels into the dendrites, through the cell body, and away into the axon, all the way to the end of the axon, to the axon terminal. The axons are usually myelinated, which means it has this insulation, this myelin sheath, this cholesterol. And if it demyelinates, the impulses slow down. They short circuit. That's called multiple sclerosis. Okay, when we come back, I will come back to a review on the 4 different types of tissues.